This video is sponsored by Aura. All right, y'all, it's a new year, which means it's time for the same old tired resolutions, which means that you probably noticed that your local Planet Fitness is now packed to the brim full of folk trying to grow a BBL by doing back squats and unweighted booty band exercises. On top of a bunch of broccoli heads crowding the Smith machine and taking 7-minute rest in between sets so that they can record TikTok dances. Please come back, baby Jesus. Well, unlike those folk, you, yes, you, bucko, or bucket, or bucky, can actually make a resolution that's going to last beyond President's Day this year. And that's to protect your identity from all those nasty spammers and scammers who find ways to drag up whole 11-page identity reports like this one on your screen that show your home address, your email, all of your past addresses, your phone number, your social security, your bank account information, even your arrest record if you have one. Yeah, that's kind of bad, isn't it? Luckily for you, that's where today's sponsor, Aura, comes in. Aura makes requests to those data brokerage sites to have your information removed from off of them. And that might not sound too special at a glance, but there is more, folks. You also get access to things like a fast VPN, a password manager, alerts when your information has been leaked onto the dark web, also fraud alerts when folk try to access your credit or banking accounts. And unlike those other guys, you get all of that for one flat rate. Yeah, that sounds like a resolution worth keeping, right? So why don't you use my link in the description right now or what's popping up on your screen, or just enter aura.com/Lil Bill into your browser and you can get 14 days for free. Again, that's aura.com/Lil Bill. And yeah, you can't grow a booty in 3 months, baby. I'm sorry. It don't work like that. Oats and rice, girl. So before I do get into the meat of this video, give me like 5 minutes to rant real quick. Maybe a little bit more or less, depending on how irked I am at the moment. I promise it all comes together in the end. This is your brain on autism. Around Thanksgiving time last year, I saw a bunch of TikToks and YouTubes with some version of rap fatigue in the title. And instantly my catcher radar went berserk. For y'all that don't know what rap fatigue is, let me tell you what they said, and then let me tell you what they really meant. Basically, it's that same old, we're not against rap, but we are against those thugs line that we've been hearing since Thuggish Ruggish Bone, and really since the 80s, honestly, with an added dose of internalized misogyny aimed at your favorite booty rappers of the day. Just like black fatigue a few months before that and ghetto fatigue before that, it's really just another thinly veiled attempt to intellectualize respectability politics, which itself is just a thinly veiled anti-blackness and racial insecurity born of an inability to engage one's own blackness outside of the scope of white supremacy. So again, cooning, because country has a lot of the same issues with its repetitive themes and lyrics as mainstream hip-hop does, on top of decades worth of white knight and stay in the kitchen style misogyny that got people like Shania Twain and Reba McEntire and even the Dixie Chicks back when they were still Dixie blacklisted. But I dropped a whole video earlier this year with that science on the second channel. So yeah, go subscribe like I've been telling you for the longest forever, bucko. My point is, it's always hip hop that gets made into the poster child of declining morals when Guns N' Roses made a song with Axl Rose banging his bandmate's girlfriend as the backing track. Around the same time that MC Hammer was in Saturday morning cartoons dressed up like Aladdin. It irks me because, as I said in an even earlier rant video that I made on the second channel, it's not that hip hop doesn't have any of these problems. I literally made a whole video last year on this channel that y'all can no longer see because YouTube is a syphilitic dick, about how hip hop's most famous groupie laid the foundation for the coochie rap revolution we see today, and how much of a two-edged sword said revolution has become. My aggravation comes from the fact that it feels like it's only hip hop that ever gets given the broad brush treatment, when I literally force myself to listen to like 6 hours of Morgan Wallen albums just to prove myself wrong, until I realized that this man's whole catalog is literally just the same 3 songs over and over again. I hate my ex, I miss my ex, and I hate my ex because I miss my ex. Oh yeah, there is a 4th one in there. Thank God I'm a country boy. Woo! Whenever we talk about hip hop, though, it's the casual heads that wind up holding the mic the longest, and they almost always wind up painting the whole genre with a brush that starts at DJ Academics and ends with Young Boy Never Broke Again. This, by the way, is the cover art for Sabrina Carpenter's album. But when she does it, it's sex positivity. Again, how many people renting their garments over WAP and Pound Town,
wet ass P-word, make that pullout game weak,
have ever heard tracks like Balloons or Perfect Picture? And it's not just No Name and Simbi. There are not isolated cases. There's Rhapsody, who's been doing the whole conscious rap adjacency thing for like 20 years now. There's Tierra Whack, there's Rico Nasty, there's Backwash, and yes, Meg's catalog does actually go deeper than bedroom bars. The only reason you don't know that is because you let the algorithm give you an intro course on her music and then decided that you were ready to teach a graduate class on it. Like, again, oh my God, some of y'all really need to talk less and just, it throws me how much information is so widely available now, and the more information we get, the collectively dumber we get. At the same, it makes perfect sense, but at the same time, it doesn't. Whatever, moving on. And that's just the ladies. There's also McKinley Dixon. There's Mick Jenkins. There's Mike. There's Mac Homie, there's Ray Vaughn, Gaiz Guevara, Danny Brown, Boney James, a bunch of other folk who aren't Kendrick Lamar, Jid, or Cole, doing what y'all would call conscious rap. Dudes whose names aren't in the top 40, and that's why y'all don't know their names. Which now leads me to the impetus for this video. The only way that I can describe Billy Woods is, sonically, he's like I guess you can call him like the 9-inch nails of hip hop music, or maybe Deftones, or a Perfect Circle or something. My point is, you're probably not going to get it on your first, your third, even your 5th spin. You're probably not going to get it. But once you do, you're hooked like a flounder on a fishing line. More importantly for this discussion, though, Billy Woods is everything that Kendrick Lamar is presented as: a real-life black revolutionary. Again, I'm not doing the whole what Kendrick's politics really are thing with y'all. I've done like 4 or 5 videos that featured him, and so y'all can kind of glean from all of those videos, plus the 3 that I did on him specifically at some point. So yeah, it's enough. It's enough talking about it. 3/4 of hip hop Twitter is just Kendrick Lamar videos. It's enough, dog. But my point is, Kendrick is not unlike Barack Obama, and I think that he knows that. What I mean is that he has adopted the aesthetic and even some of the rhetoric of black radicalism. But again, anybody with eyes and ears that work, and most importantly, a mind that can actually look past the glaze, can tell you that he ain't really on that type of time, and he's not trying to be. And I mean, good on him for that. I've said in the past that we both expect and demand far too much from celebrities in regards to our own liberation. It's way too many folk sitting around waiting for Superman, all the while we got a nation full of Gordon Freemans who can change the world if they just got off their behinds and did the little things that make revolutions real. I'm not talking about the Reddit revolution. I'm talking about something real. I'm talking about something practical. That said, if we really did want a revolution, then why aren't the revolutionaries as popular as the cosplayers? This is why I brought up Billy Woods. Now, Granted, everything seems to indicate that this man has and continues to do everything in his power to not be noticed in public, but that's not necessarily true for his music. Woods has made, in my opinion, 3 of the best albums, no, not hip hop albums, but just albums, period, of the entire decade thus far, and 2 of them in the same year, last year. And I'm not the only one who thinks this. Do me a favor and Google best hip hop album of the decade, and you're likely to see his name pop up everywhere from Metacritic to album of the year to rate the album to the freaking Jacobin of all places. And yet there's never been so much as a rumor of a Grammy nod being directed his way, which is by design. And that's kind of what I'm getting at with this video. I talked about this on the second channel, but the point of a Grammy, in my opinion, isn't necessarily to award artistry. It is to let the casual head know who and what to search for the next time that they open their streaming app of choice. But for that to happen, you have to submit your work to the committee for consideration. You have to play the game if you want to win it. So yeah, as I said before, Drake was onto something with that whole Kendrick opened his mouth again line. I did a whole 2-hour video about this at the beginning of last year. But I mean, this is Drake. Of course he was going to punt on 3rd and short and go for the low hanging fruit instead of, they not like us. They not like us. Again, there's layers to that. If you are actually one of us, then you understand the layers and whatever. Whatever, nigga. My point is, revolutionaries don't seek a cosign from the people they revolt against, let alone do they receive one. But that then begs the question of how will we know about them, let alone their work, without the proper channels to broadcast it? It's the catch-22 of, do I give it to you raw and unfiltered the way that it's meant and ought to be taken? Or do I turn the spice level down enough for the casual head to handle, but then wind up compromising the integrity of the dish in the process? So yeah, basically it's the same question that every ethnic restaurant ever has had to ask itself once it, opened up in a predominantly non-ethnic neighborhood. That's not at all an easy question to answer. Talking about feeding the white folks. But it is one that I don't see enough people bothering to ask. There was once someone on this channel who said that Bill, talking about me now, loves making videos, but he hates the fact that we watch them, which is half true. All right, 75%. I don't hate that my art has an audience. Anybody who tells you that they do is a bigger liar than body tubers. Mike Israel. But I do hate the idea that some of y'all think that watching my videos is going to end world hunger or free Palestine or something, because it's not going to do that. I hate the very idea of celebrity, and especially of me being one, even if a micro one, which then begs the question, when and why did revolution become so rewarding then? I know that some of y'all are watching this and thinking this is supposed to be another Kendrick hit piece or whatever, but I've said the same things about folk like Beyonce. I've said the same thing about her hubby. To be honest, the biggest offender in mainstream media for my money is, or at least mainstream black media, is Killer Mike. This is what I call the black radical industrial complex. And to be honest, we can just drop the black altogether, because any number of non-black celebrities, both mainstream and online, have and are making a bag by selling a revolution they have no desire to see, let alone to start themselves. Why? Well, and it's elementary, Watson. They're far too invested in the current system to actively dismantle it, and they know this. But then again, so do we. And that's what we're really going to explore today. When, where, and how did revolution go on sale? And most importantly, who's buying? That's what I'm getting. You're buying. That's what I'm getting at. Oh, title card, Clarence. How you gonna win my trust when the last one deep? How you gonna binge on love when the devil don't sleep? Okay, so where do I even start with this? I'm assuming we know at this point what revolution means, or at least have a general idea of what that word means. Quite literally, it's revolting against the status quo. You're attempting to dismantle the current way that things work, which then gets into this dilemma. At what point does the revolutionary become compromised? How much does one participate in the system before you become an agent of it? Now, listen, this isn't me saying, oh, if you're a leftist, then why do you have a Patreon? That's being spouted by people who have never seen a bill or likely a job application. The good book puts it plainly. If you don't work, then you ain't going to eat. That's just the way of the world. According to Earth, Wind, and Fire, it is, at least. That's how that song goes, right? I don't know, whatever. I'm not as old as y'all think I am. I promise you, losing your hair adds like 10, 15 years. Making money does not make you a capitalist. Making money at the direct expense of others does, however. For example, Clarence and I have an arrangement. He edits my videos, and then I agreed to let him out of the basement every other business day, business days only. That said, Clarence is not my employee. He is a private contractor, meaning he is free to do work for anyone else who needs it for whatever term he deems fair, so long as he does so on days he's not locked up in the basement. What makes me a capitalist, though, is when I buy a computer, I buy the editing software on that computer, and I tell Clarence that he can work only with that computer. And anything that he makes with that computer belongs to me. That is what capitalism is when you invest property, machinery, cash, in other words, capital, anything other than your own labor into something or someone with the intent of making more than you put in. So no, owning your primary residence does not make you a capitalist. But buying a house with the intent to sell or rent it out for profit, or even just to increase your personal equity, does. Making money from ads on YouTube videos does not make you a capitalist, but sponsoring someone to make a YouTube video does. Signing a multi-million-dollar contract to put an orange ball through a metal ring does not make you a capitalist, but writing that check and then expecting the person who signed it will play well enough to produce ticket and merch sales does. Is this making sense for y'all now? Making money doesn't make you a capitalist by default. But investing money in someone or something with the intention of making even more money than you put in does make you one. Which now leads me into the real world where most of us live. The richest people in the world aren't so because of their own labor or even that of those who work directly with them. They are so because they put money, whether directly or not, into someone else's labor, expecting to get back more than what they gave. So going back to Clarence for a minute, as part of our agreement, I give him a wage, yes, but I also give him my labor to make look and sound presentable before it gets uploaded and presented to y'all. Before it gets to him, though, first, I have to research, I have to outline, I have to write the script, I have to record the B-roll, which is hours of labor that I did by myself that he has no direct impact on. Now, if I said to him, "Hey, Bucko, I'll throw you a few bucks to write, film, and edit a documentary on I don't know the crack pipe industry or something, and I'll hold on to whatever revenue it generates and then pay you what I think your part in that is worth," then yeah, that is capitalism. Even if that wage is mutually agreed upon, the point is I didn't make anything myself. I paid someone to do all the hard work for me and then just cashed the check. Which now brings me back to your faves. Jay, Bay, Mike, and Kenny, and for that matter, Rihanna, Ye, and a bunch of other black celebrities, both past and present, have invested money into a number of ventures, including fashion, cosmetics, entertainment, and real estate that do not require their direct labor to generate profit. Now, if the question is, where did the money come from in the first place, smart guy, that doesn't change the facts. Even if the money you invested was generated through your own labor, it doesn't change the fact that it's money and not labor that you are investing into this venture. Again, with the intent of making more money than what you put in. So what's the point is what you're probably asking me now. Is that your mother loves me more than she'll ever love you. But more importantly is that when you do capitalism, you are now actively engaged in the system and thereby complicit in its perpetuation. You are now a part of the problem, even if small. Because listen, I'm not going to sit here and hold you like Kendrick is Black Bezos or something. He's on the lower end of Black capitalists despite his investment capacity. I honestly he really could be doing a lot more with that. Rihanna honestly is the worst offender that I've named. Yes, much more than Jay or Bay just by virtue of Fenty Cosmetics. Like I said in the Black Capitalism video, won't save us, or the Black Capital, whatever. Yeah. Clarence is probably putting the thumbnail up right now. Cosmetics is the worst supply chain exploiter. If y'all think Tesla is bad, Mac makes that look like Disneyland. I ain't even gonna hold you. So again, the point of this video isn't about which capitalist is worse and which is first, or else the thumb for this would just be a headshot of Riri. But the point is when capitalists use radical rhetoric as their branding. Killer Mike, everybody. Killer Mike has said and done a number of things that can be seen as radical at face value. Matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say that bro probably does believe that he is one. But when you look at a lot of his moves and even listen to some of the things he says, the tea leaves aren't really adding up, you know what I mean? I'm not going to bother bringing up every single isolated case of Mike's moves, not really reflecting the radicalism he's known for. I'll just sum it up by saying that he's a Garveyite. And I say this as a child of a Garveyite and a Reformed 5%er. So this isn't shade, it's just facts. I know what I'm talking about. Even if he doesn't know it, that's what he is. And that, at the end of the day, that's the problem. I said this in the Hotep video, but for y'all that don't know, Garvey's whole philosophy, or at least at least the parts that are important for this video, boiled down to Black people having our own separate and distinct identity and interest from non-Black Americans. Check one in the Garvey had a point column. He also believed that in order for Black people to attain a status equal to whites, we needed to prioritize our specific interests over any universal progressive or liberal or working class or whatever interest, because doing so, I mean, doing the whole, class, not race bro thing would mean that the problems that apply specifically to race and racism would get tossed to the wayside once the white folks got their crumbs. Again, Garvey had a point. History tells us this. Garvey also believed that in order to do this, Black people needed to be, quote, independent of white capital and white employers to achieve salvation, who he argued would always favor whiteness, even if subconsciously. No, this man is on a roll, right? And he also believed that the only way to make this possible was through capitalism. Yeah, and that's where this whole thing goes off the rails, man. Like I've explained in the past and even earlier in this very script, capitalism on a societal, let alone global scale, like literally globalization, only works when you have a class of haves and a separate class of have-nots, who then generate the capital that the haves use to invest into hiring more have-nots. You see what I'm saying? So in Garvey's Black separatist society, the have-nots will always be Black. And there's nothing that obliges the haves to invest more than what they deem necessary into the have-nots. So now you're back at square one, unless you leave it to the have-nots to determine what share of the capital they ought to be owed, or even if they ought to own a share of the means of production, let alone the capital, which now gets you into worker co-op territory, which is not capital. You see why this don't work, right? And Mike, in his heart of hearts, I believe, knows this, which is why he spends more time BSing his critics than actually engaging with that criticism.
But bigger than that, y'all always ask for money at the end. After telling you that you ain't shit for being a black capitalist.
Yeah. Could I have $10 for my Patreon? I'm like, you piece of shit ass nigga.
You're right.
You know?
Again, I'm not going to bother going at Mike specifically because it's already been done by people who know much better than me, and that's not the point of me bringing him up. The point is that Mike understands how his branding conflicts with his movements a lot of times. He is not a revolutionary because he quite literally cannot afford to be a revolutionary. A dismantling of the current socioeconomic system means compromising his stake in said system, and that's not a bridge he nor any of your other faves are willing to cross, including myself. And that's really the heart of this video, even if not the whole point. We'll get to that a little bit later on. At the end of the day, what Mike and the like are selling you is not their politics, though. What they're selling you is music. Even if the politics are a big part of their appeal, you wouldn't care if the music weren't good. You wouldn't care if the movie wasn't fascinating. You wouldn't care if the form of entertainment that they're getting. My point is that politics is not the whole of their entertainment. It's just part of the appeal of said entertainment, but they can still be and have been effective entertainers absent of their politics. Which now brings me to Hasan. Listen, I don't have anything personal against bro. He's by far the least problematic of his ilk. Matter of fact, I'll go so far as to say that Hasan's presence is not only a net positive, but is necessary in this space. If for nothing else, then he is a gateway for many 24 and younger men, especially, white 24 and younger men, into left-leaning politics. The problem is, a lot of them stop there and assume that they got it all, then start saying stuff like, it's class, not race, bro. Like, Jesus. Oh my God, y'all really need to get off the internet, man, and start talking to some actually, melanated folks, because it's just embarrassing. Even some of the melanateds do that, and that oh my God, I blame y'all's parents for that one. Hasan's biggest problem is that honestly, he don't like to admit, let alone be told that he's wrong.
You really don't want to talk about us unless it comes from voting. When is the last time you spoke about Sudan? I'm going to ether you. Any other black folk want to engage in radical activist language in this chat? Suck my cock.
Which, I mean, that's being white, or I guess in his case, that's being white adjacent on the internet in a nutshell. But the problem around Hasan is that a lot of his fans think that watching his streams make them radical, even revolutionaries. And no, bucko, it don't. Especially when all you're doing is watching his stream and then reacting to Jubilee videos. Hasan, and for that matter, Midas Touch Media, Brian Tyler Cohen, The Majority Report, Philip DeFranco. You could even throw, some more news in there. You could throw the homie FD in there as well. Are as big as they are because of the radical industrial complex. I'm not re-recording that. And even some of them have acknowledged as much. Again, I literally started this section off by calling my own number because I too have built this platform in no small part by commodifying my politics, which for the record, I don't think is an inherently bad thing. It only becomes an issue when folk like me, and more importantly, the folk watching us, confuse what we do for praxis, let alone for revolution, which now finally leads me to my arch nemesis. You finna get yours, nigga. So I don't know if y'all have noticed this, but both I and FD and others have spent the last over a year now actively moving away from hashtag breadtube style content, just for the simple reason that, well, for two reasons, really. One, a lot of y'all are annoying as F, to keep it a buck. I ain't even gonna hold you. I guess that's what happens when you make politics the whole of your personality. The second part is, what more really is there to say at this point? Like, how many more capitalism bad videos do y'all need before you conclude that capitalism bad? If you ask me, the breadtube bubble was always bound to burst the same way that the Gamergate one did. That isn't to say you can't make a bag off of screaming at imaginary feminazis. I mean, Critical Drinker is still right there kicking somewhere. But look at how far like the quartering has fallen since the decade began. Matter of fact, bringing this a little closer to this sphere, like, is Vosh even relevant anymore? My point is, unless you have the charisma of somebody like Hasan, and I ain't even gonna hold you, unless you present as conventionally attractive as Hasan does or somebody, just sitting in front of a mic and commenting on the news of the day ain't gonna get you the bag that it once did. But what we, as in folk like FD and myself, and I mean, you could throw, Farm Man in there, as well as, a bunch of others. I mean, I know Khadija is no longer on YouTube, but that's another great example of what I'm talking about. T Noir, Think Peace Tribe, Color Mind. I could just go down the line. The stuff that we do, the Illuminati, is even less profitable, is my point. One thing I want to push back against is this point of discussion that I've seen come up lately. And that's this idea that the reason why a lot of our views are down, which have kind of rebounded since, honestly, is because more people are actually doing praxis in real life, which means that they don't have a need to watch the videos anymore. Because, listen, I don't want to say that that's not true, but it's also not as true as some of y'all think it is. And the evidence is in the view counts. Again, going back to FD, he's made a bunch of videos last year alone that on paper look like hits, and none of them are overtly political, let alone leftist. The Beyonce video, the Lupe Fiasco video, the Center John, which I think was the best video he did last year. All topics you would think would crack 1 million views with a channel his size. And yet, none of them have at time of writing. In fact, the only one, aside from the one I'm about to mention, that reached that mark was the Hotep video. And it took basically the whole year to get there. But you know what did cross 1 million views? In like 10 days, the one with Charlie Kirk in the thumbnail. And it's not just him either. At time of writing, Think Peace Tribe has done 2 excellent videos, the one on gentrification and the second on, the whole, I guess it was their way of addressing the whole rat fatigue argument. 2 great videos that didn't get nearly the kind of traction as, again, the John with Charlie Kirk in the thumb, which at time of writing is like the number 39 most hyped video or something like that. I really don't know how the hype thing works, but you get what I'm saying, right? I did the same thing earlier this year. I literally uploaded a 3-year-old video talking about COINTELPRO that had absolutely nothing to do with anybody on the thumb. But I knew that it was going to get me an easy 90, 100,000 views just based on who I put in the thumbnail. That's my point, is that a good portion of our audience is not here to learn about Black culture. They're not here for Black social or cultural analysis. And I get it. It'd be foolish for me or anyone else to expect white folks to care that deep about an experience that is not their own. That was literally the point of the left has a whiteness problem that I did a few years ago. But my point is, I don't believe it's that folk are too busy working to be bothered with being entertained by politics. It's that there's a particular kind of content that they're looking for, and they're not going to stick around until and unless they get it. Specifically, just getting to brass tacks here, there's a significant portion of our audience that all they want to see is a Black face pat them on the back for having the right opinion about the right thing at the right time. They just want to see a colored face regurgitate their own thoughts back to them. Again, they're not here to learn. They're here to get gassed. You know what I mean? And again, if I'm wrong, then why did Feek have to change the thumb and title for the Hotep vid like 2 or 3 times before it got any real motion? And then why did the Charlie Kirk joint hit 1 million views after he had to re-upload it like twice, and it was also hyped to Kingdom Come. You know what I mean? Again, we understand that we are entertainers first, and that politics is just a vehicle that we use to achieve the end of entertaining y'all. Basically, what we're making is documentaries here. Is it possible that someone watching me or any of the folk that I mentioned will be moved to do something radical? Yeah, like, duh, nigga, that's literally the reason why I can't really speak for anybody else, but that's literally the reason why I do what I do. I've met both online and in real life a bunch of folk who have said that my videos are the reason they joined the food bank or started a mutual aid fund or a community garden or something. Literally, one dude said that he quit his job and became a teacher in part because of things that I've said on this channel. And it gives me goosebumps to think about even right now that, you know, these goofy, stupid videos of mine actually have some real world impact like that. That said, though, there's still a bunch of others that I'd even argue the majority of people who have watched my videos and maybe left a like, perhaps even a comment, and that was it. Is that a bad thing necessarily? No, it's not. Again, not unless you think that liking my video is going to do anything but put money in my pocket. And let's not act like you haven't seen those tweets in YouTube votes saying, leave a like here if you want the unredacted Epstein files to be released. And yes, I am talking about Occupy Democrats. I don't know why. I feel like I blocked it. Why do I keep getting their post, man? It doesn't matter, in my opinion, whether folk genuinely believe that signal boosting a Facebook post influences policy, which is considering our current administration, I'm not convinced that it doesn't. But it's the fact that so many people are satisfied with a revolutionary aesthetic, with just talking about, you know, a big R revolution, you feel me, like it's the rapture or something. So long as we can see and hear famous faces saying the things that we don't have the platform to say loud enough ourselves, and that's good enough for a lot of us. And we reward them for doing so with profit, you know what I mean? Again, I never had a problem with Kendrick's Super Bowl performance. The same way I didn't have a problem with Beyonce's. I actually thoroughly enjoyed both. I don't have an issue with Hasan getting a spread in GQ or whatever. And I don't have that much of a problem with Killer Mike until, again, he starts BSing his critics. But again, folk have already covered that. What I do have a problem with is when we, and that includes myself, mistake entertainment for revolution. And I especially hate when we do so to deflect from our own stake and our own state. Which now brings me to the internet's newest favorite cult of personality. Get your torch and pitchforks out, folks. Okay, so let me say for like, I don't know, the third time in this video that I don't have an issue personally with any of the people that I've mentioned. I'm actually even friends with some of them. I don't even have an issue with their personal politics per se, at least not in the context of this specific discussion. But it's how we respond to their presentations and even concoct our own narratives based on that presentation and then project it onto them. And I think that Mamdani is the best example of that in recent memory, especially in the months following his big win. So before I go any further, let me explain what a cult of personality actually is for y'all that may have an idea, but don't exactly know what that phrase means or entails. But you need something fancy to say to impress your girlfriend's parents next Thanksgiving, given how badly you bombed last year's. Basically it's standhood, honestly, but with real world consequences, specifically consequences on how we are governed. A more technical definition is it's when a public figure is idealized by their base to the point of heroism, sometimes infallibility even. Folk get so caught up on what that person represents that they either lose the plot of what their actual policy is, or the state forces them to forget what their actual policy is. Examples of the latter are, you know, authoritarians like, I don't know, like Stalin, Mao, Kim Il-sung, even some so-called benevolent dictators like Joseph Broz Tito of Yugoslavia. And that right there is one of, if not the biggest issue with cults of personality. When you build an entire ideology, an entire government sometimes, around a single charismatic personality, what happens when that person either dies, like Tito, or does or says something so out of pocket that it shatters support among their base? Epstein files have entered the chat. And this is why, even at its height, I was never convinced that a majority of Americans were full-blooded Trump humpers. MAGA maybe, but there is a difference, and we will get to that soon. Despite what your favorite polytuber says, the poll tells us that Trump didn't win in 2016 or 2024 because the majority of Americans voted for him. He won because a significant portion of the population didn't care enough if he did win, which opens up a whole other conversation that's not for this video. But the point is, anytime you build a platform around one charismatic individual, you're already putting a timer on your movement's lifespan. So perhaps what's a more important question then is, what happens with cult of personalities in the context of electoralism? What if you do get your guy in office, and what if your guy fails to be the Superman or woman that you elected them to be? What if all that could have been avoided if you had treated them like a step in the right direction instead of the finish line? Which now brings me back to Mamdani. Granted, there's no way to predict how and whether folk will be mobilized by his election. There's really no way to predict whether people will treat this as the start or the finish. But I'm not going to lie, based on the weird reactions that some of y'all had during that Trump meeting, or the fact that some of y'all keep calling him a socialist, even though if you actually look into his stances on things or listen to what he actually says, then instead of just looking at his party affiliations or projecting, again, your own ideals onto him, you would know better than that. I'm skeptical, to say the least, is what I'm saying. But to really understand where I'm going with this, we got to go back 20 years before the mania. It is 2004. We're neck deep in a war that we thought would have ended 2 years earlier and would wind up lasting for over a decade longer. It's the end of W's first term as POTUS, and that post 9/11 solidarity that contributed to his historic popularity is kind of wearing off, to the point that Dems feel that they feel like they got a chance to take the White House back, nominating Massachusetts Senator John Kerry, who wound up losing to Bush in no small part because of his nasty habit of flip-flopping on issues like a pair of chancletas. But none of that is important. What is important is that year's DNCC, where Kerry accepted the nomination, was also host to what might be, or actually is, the most important speech in 21st century U.S. politics, and the launching pad for America's first black president. I think it was at this moment that Dems knew that they were playing for the long game now. Kerry wasn't the most inspiring candidate on a good day to begin with. Like, you know that Jack Johnson, John Jackson bit from Futurama? This election was more like that than anything that I can remember, honestly.
These are the candidates? They sound like clones. Wait a minute. They are clones.
Obama, however, came to Boston with the cadence of a black preacher and the rhetoric of a civil rights activist. He energized the base in a way that it hadn't been since Bill Clinton taught preteens the world over what a blowjob was via C-SPAN. Obama was hope incarnate, is my point, and both he and his party mates knew that. A vote for Obama was a vote for change. It was a vote to, if nothing else, dismantle the status quo for the sake of. Except if you actually paid attention to what he was saying, it wasn't. Again, if you ignored the cadence and just listened to the content of his sermons, or just like actually read his policy on his campaign website, then you would have understood back then that Obama was at best a lateral move from what establishment Dems had been since the 80s. Like that's quite literally what he's quite literally a textbook third wave Democrat. Didn't matter though. A cult of personality had formed around him almost immediately after that keynote. In no small part because he was the first black man that looked like he might actually have a shot. No, Jesse Jackson doesn't count. You could not critique Obama, even if it was a good one, even if it was given in good faith, because the cult had already anointed him their savior. And to speak anything but glowingly about him was considered sacrilege. It was considered blasphemy, apostasy even. Point being, if you did not join the cult, then you were considered an op, period. You were a hindrance to progress, a loyalist to the old guard, the same one that got us in this mess to begin with. Even if you weren't a liberal, you still had to be careful about the way that you spoke about Obama. If for no other reason than a lot of what he said was jibing with the other side, or at least the parts of the other side that could look past his skin color. But we ain't getting into that. This is how the primary was framed, even, and by both sides. A vote for Hillary was a vote for stability, for experience, for the devil you know, if you will. Only someone who had been in and around Capitol Hill for more than a term or two could right the ship after Bush sent it off course. And that was Hillary's case against Obama. He was too green. He was too wet behind the ears to really know what he was doing. Like he was he was quite literally, you feel me, a state representative like 8 years earlier or something like that. Barack, on the other hand, quite accurately argued that just going back to the 90s was not enough for an America that would soon see millennials overtake Gen X and the baby boomers as the bulk of the workforce. A vote for Hillary was a vote to go backwards. The 90s were dead and gone, and it was time for some new blood to take the wheel. And he did. In no small part because you quite literally could not so much as play devil's advocate without the cult attempting to crucify you for it. Now, if that sounds familiar, it's because that's basically what Mamdani mania devolved into in the waning days of that campaign and even immediately afterward. You could not so much as point out the man's own words without being called a lib or a psyop or whatever. But the question is, why though? That's the important part, and also the real purpose of this video. Again, this isn't about Mamdani individually, because if it wasn't him, it was always going to be somebody else. Matter of fact, it has been multiple someone else's. It was AOC. It was Bernie. And most uncannily of all, it's been Obama. It was even Kamala, depending on who you talk to. The difference is, at least with those folk, it was a national office they were running for. Again, I will concede that being the mayor of the financial center of the world is kind of a big deal. But at the end of the day, we're talking about a municipal election that wound up capturing the hearts, minds, and attention of an entire country. You could even argue, much of the, or at least the internet, when ultimately what Mamdani does and does not do will have no direct impact on the vast majority of people caping so hard for him. So again, why? Why did we make such a big freaking deal about big yellow block letters on main streets that wound up getting washed away once the right people complained about it for long enough? All the while, not a single piece of legislation was drafted that directly addressed what we were protesting for to begin with. Why did folk get mad when others pointed out how pointless those No Kings protests were, when they were literally sponsored by the very system that we are supposed to be protesting against, right? Why were some of y'all running from YouTube to YouTube demanding the same 3 Palestine videos and then got salty when folk like me said, go watch Lost Futures? That's basically his whole channel now. Like, nah, for real, jokes aside, go give him some love. And why, again, did a municipal election capture the hearts and minds of progressives like it were a presidential one? It's because somewhere deep down in our hearts, we know that we're no better than Kendrick. We're no better than Mike. We are far too invested in the system as is to truly revolt against it. As I've said in the past, my biggest issue with this space is that it's full of folk who are more concerned with being seen by the right people, having the right opinion, than actually applying their politics practically. And we settle on patting ourselves on the back for knowing real tea and not doing anything about the tea. That's just it. Just because you've seen the cave, it doesn't mean that you're willing to leave it, or at least the figures in the back. Y'all know the cave allegory. Y'all know where I'm getting with this. So long as the powers dangle enough of the carrot to reach and us to, fool ourselves into being satisfied with it, many of us will never truly divest from this system. Even, again, if the carrot isn't truly enough to satiate, it's better than starving. And because so many of us have learned to find some level of comfort, even contentment within the current system, we won't gamble the little we have for a chance at freedom, especially if that freedom won't come in our lifetimes. You know what I mean? Most people are afraid of freedom, or at least afraid of what freedom would cost. And that's because we're conditioned to be so. That was what one-dimensional man was all about. Most of us won't divest from electoralism because doing so acknowledges that ultimately we are the ones responsible for our own liberation. Instead, we choose to anoint a savior to do the hard work for us while we continue to chase the master's baubles around town. The ultimate intention of all such phrases is to dupe the proletariat. The advance which the proletarian party is bound to make by such independent action is indefinitely more important than the disadvantage that might be incurred by the presence of a few reactionaries in the representative body. That was Marx, by the way, and y'all know how I feel about Karl. And the point he was making is electoralism is not revolutionary action. It is at best harm reduction, and at worst, it's an excuse we use to deflect from the fact that we just can't manage to divorce ourselves from the system. As the homie Colormine tweeted a while back, it's wild the number of so-called leftists who then turned liberal once their guy got elected. Again, my point isn't to say that Mamdani getting elected is a bad thing. Far from it, in fact. Or even that his election was meaningless. Again, far from it. But it is to say that he being elected is not enough. Living and dying by electoral politics is, in my opinion, an admission of defeat. It says that we can't beat the system. The best we can do is the little we can within it. Something that I've even seen a few of y'all imply or just say straight up in the comments. And that right there, again, is my problem. Why do you think that we can't win? And who told you that? And why did you listen to them in the first place? And what did they say to convince you of that? That's the difference between folk like us and the Kwame Tures and the Asada Shakurs and Angela and Huey and Mumia and a bunch of other folk past and present, some dead and some still living. They were convinced that they would see victory. And even if they didn't see victory in their lifetimes, then at the very least, their children and their grandchildren would reap the benefit of their labor. But that's part of the problem, isn't it? A lot of us aren't willing to put that on the line because we're too self-interested to put it on the line. If I can't reap the fruits of the labor, then what's the point in even putting the labor in to begin with? But that, I'm reminded of something that the homies BP and Bellamy said respectively. What BP told me was that we are responsible for 8 generations. And no, they're not the first one to tell me this, but the way that it was articulated is the best way that I've heard it thus far. The 4 that came before us and the 4 that will come after us. In other words, we have a duty to build on the foundation set by our ancestors to build the launching pad for our descendants, even if they aren't direct. This is why I hate doomerism on a fundamental level, because even if you won't reap the harvest of your actions and even inaction, someone else will down the line. And it was that mindset that motivated someone in the past to fight for your privilege to not be bothered to begin with. And that's especially true if you're melanated. But that's just it, isn't it? And it's the part that's equal parts disheartening and infuriating. So let's go back to MAGA for a second. Here's the thing that many of us are starting to realize, or at least are starting to see made manifest. I still believe that MAGA is a vocal minority within American conservatism, but that minority is undoubtedly the most active, even with all of Trump's personal issues, because the truth about MAGA is that Trumpism was just a part of it, and that's what makes it so alarming. As I've said in the past, MAGA is just the latest example of an ideology that lies at the very core of this country's framework. It is manifest destiny. It is American exceptionalism. It is the lost cause myth. It is the moral majority. It is the Tea Party movement. All of those movements are built on one core belief, that America was built for the interest of white, specifically straight white men. And everyone else is just here to make it as nice a place as possible for white people to live in. Make America great again for white people. Take America back from non-white people. That's the unspoken part that we all should have figured out by now. This didn't start with Trump, is my point, and it won't end with him either. He's not the savior. He is an avatar. And the minute that he isn't fit, they'll find another one. Matter of fact, they they kind of already have a bunch of them now. That's Nick Fuentes. That was Charlie Kirk before he, got murked. It could be Aiden Ross, believe it or not. Don't be surprised if Marjorie Taylor Spraytan winds up running for governor of I was finna say the governor of Atlanta, the governor of Georgia this year, and winds up winning. And if she does win, don't be surprised if she winds up running for the Republican primary in 2032. This was a plan that started all the way back in 2008. It was right then when Obama made history that MAGA was born. They made up in their mind, come hell or high water, even if some of them had to die before the seeds bore fruit, that they were going to win. And that they were going to win because the structures necessary for them to do so were already in place. Because here's the thing, folks. Don't let the riot gear and the failed coups fool you. MAGA is not a revolutionary force. Its purpose is to maintain, even reset the status quo to what it has been in this country historically. America for white people. So even though I've done it myself, pointing at the truckers and saying, why can't that be us, misses the point. They don't want a new world. They don't want a revolution. They want the old one back. Matter of fact, they don't even want the old one back. They just want to stop all non-white people from participating in the current world. That's what they want. That's what great replace. They're afraid of their primacy atop the social hierarchy of being taken down. So yeah, they are a counter-revolutionary force. And that's why so many of them are police. I had a script about what would have happened to Haiti if they had never had to pay France a bunch of money that they never really owed in the first place. And the conclusion that I drew was really a lot of the same, to be honest. I mean, it would probably look a lot more like the DR today, but the thing that people forget about Haiti is the reason Toussaint was betrayed in the first place was dissatisfaction with the way that he ran things. That is to say, almost exactly the way that the French ran things. But what was he supposed to do? Plantation politics was all they knew, and that was really the only way to generate revenue, at least for the foreseeable future, especially with how much damage that the war had done and cash and in just, damage to infrastructure. That's the part a lot of us either don't know or conveniently forget about big R revolutions. Firing the gun is the easy part, but building afterwards, building a world that we can be satisfied with, that's the part that almost nobody has figured out. But Billiam, what about the Americans, you might be saying? And yeah, that's kind of my point. What happened between the colonists and Great Britain is basically Dad stepped out for smokes and never came back. Then once you made the league or you passed the bar or whatever, he showed back up and demanded that you cut him a check after the kids from his second marriage cut him off completely. Yeah, that's basically what happened. Look it up. The point is, America was already America and pretty much everything but name by the time war broke out. The society, the institutions, the economy. The only real point of contention was how/if to centralize, which they only did after a different rebellion almost tanked the Union before it became one. So yeah, America, even with like 100 years head start, still had to recover its own fumble on the whole self-governance thing. Point being, say it with me, kids. Everybody want to die for the revolution, but don't nobody want to do the dishes. And that's because doing the dishes is twice as tedious and not nearly as sexy as dying. It takes a lot more time, effort, and energy to build than destroy. Time a lot of us rather spend pursuing comforts within arm's reach than freedom that may be a mile away. And that's the part that makes all of this, Kendrick's Super Bowl, Hasan's whole career, Mamdani Mania, all of it, this very YouTube channel makes it all possible. It's our own complacency. The problem is so much that folk don't want a revolution. It's that many of us aren't willing to put up what it would cost to win one, especially if we have no guarantee that we personally will see the fruit. As Marcuse would say, a comfortable, smooth, reasonable, democratic unfreedom prevails in advanced industrial civilization. one that was largely inaccessible to black people until the civil rights era, specifically until the passing of the Fair Housing Act. We have finally managed to taste, even if a little bit, that so-called American dream. In the process, many of us succumbed to the same trap that our unmelanated brethren did in the post-war economic boom. One-dimensional thought. We became a society addicted to comfort, convenience, and the endless singular pursuit of such, to the point that we hardly ever stop to ask ourselves, well, what did this convenience and comfort cost? The answer is freedom. But many of us don't even know that, because we've been bound for so long that we not only don't know what freedom looks like, but we fear what it demands of us. See, I disagree with Marcuse that we live in a state of false consciousness, or if we do, I believe we do so willingly, because the divorce from that consciousness means confronting just how much work it would take to achieve liberation. Because why else did the internet lose its mind over Kendrick dropping 40 acres and a mule on a show where every evil empire on the planet is fighting for ad space? Why was Beyonce tutting in a leather jacket and black beret the pinnacle of black identity politics that decade, when quite literally she stands for everything that the people who made that look popular hated? Why exactly were the BLM founders able to both co-op and commodify that slogan, then make a bag and several business deals off of it, get called and dragged on the carpet by everyone who knew better, to the point that one had to resign? And for the most part, it just came and went with nowhere near the fanfare as its arrival. We don't want to start a revolution, is my point. We just want to watch it happen. We don't want a Moses. What we want is a Messiah. We don't want to be led to freedom, because that means traversing the wilderness for God only knows how long. It means a level of discomfort. It means a level of dissatisfaction that most of us are not conditioned to tolerate. We want someone to swoop down and save us while we can still make our bag in the meantime. Kendrick may not be our savior, but that don't mean we don't want him to be. And if we can't make him, it don't mean that we won't stop looking for one. And I really wish that I could end the video right there, because that's about as poetic a note as I can leave off on. But I mean, the preacher in me won't let me. I got to give y'all a little bit of hope. Damn it. Okay, so jokes aside, like I said up top, and like I've been saying for basically the life of this channel, there's nothing wrong with consuming left-wing coded content for entertainment. The problem is when you misunderstand or misrepresent consumption as practical application, what, smarty farties call praxis. We can build a better world, but that's the key. We can build it. Not watch it be built through halftime shows and corporate sloganeering. Again, there are people watching this video right now who have taken the lesson I and others have given and have used it to build community. Community is the foundation of any and every revolution, whether it's big or small or. You need a network of folk willing to do the little things, the unsexy side of radical politics. Because say it with me, kids, everybody wants to die for the revolution. But somebody got to do the dishes, man. So that's your job. Do the dishes. Start that group chat. Print the pamphlets. Organize a meeting with the folk around the way. Plant a garden. Gather toiletries to distribute to unhoused folk. Do something besides patting yourself on the back for having the right opinion or sucking off folk like me for co-signing that opinion. That's all I'm trying to get at with this, man. I've had a bunch of people talking about holding politicians accountable. And when I press and say, what does that look like? I've gotten some version of, well, we'll call their office and let them know how ticked off we are that they didn't do what we wanted them to do, which as somebody who worked in a legislative office whose job was literally to answer those calls and emails and then respond to them, they almost never get to the person that you expect them to. Like, I literally would just keep a list of bills that my boss had co-signed and just copy and pasted the summary of those bills onto a boilerplate response and then send it out. Yeah, that's your tax dollars at work, folks. In the context of revolutionary politics, the real value of a Mamdani, in my opinion, is less in what he can do and more in what he can prevent. Again, electoral politics, in my opinion, works best as harm reduction. So theoretically, having a Mamdani in office is a buffer between you and any state-sponsored counter-revolutionary force, the cops. This could be all that anti-police brutality legislation that we were talking about 5 years ago, or just straight up defunding, which in my opinion is not only much more effective, but really should be the goal. Why? Because I did a whole video about this. Police don't stop crime from happening. That's literally not their job. Their job is not to prevent crime. It's to keep too many poor and primarily colored people from gathering too close to rich people's resources. Again, y'all go look at my past stuff for that science. Community, that's what I'm getting at, is the foundation, or should be the foundation, of your politics if you call yourself leftist or whatever. It's not about any one heroic individual. It's about a community of like-minded folk all chipping in for as long as it takes to meet their shared end. Right now, you should be seeing screenshots of different folk that I've reached out to who I know are working in their communities. I'll leave their contact information on this master list that I have in the description to this video. If you are in their neck of the woods, I highly suggest that you reach out to them so that you can be a help. Or if you are someone who is actively working in your community toward this shared goal, feel free to put your information on that Excel sheet so that folk can reach out to you. Because again, this is the only, there's no point in tearing down if you don't have a foundation to build upon afterwards. Other words, you just create chaos. I almost always reference the Montgo bus boycott in these types of discussions because it's basically communal politics 101 if you're serious about it. The part that folks seem to forget about Montgo is that it wasn't spontaneous and it wasn't easy. Matter of fact, it wasn't even the first boycott of its kind. Matter of fact, the organizers of Montgo got the idea from a different boycott that took place in Baton Rouge like 10 years earlier that didn't get near the result that Montgo got, partly because it didn't get near the kind of national attention that Montgo got. It was nearly a year of people walking or carpooling to work, cab drivers slashing fares for protesters, churches raising money for shoes once those of protesters had worn out. It was white housewives busing their housemaids to and from home in between shifts, store owners offering discounts for protesters, and the NAACP in the background taking the bus company to court. My point is, the boycott worked because everybody made a sacrifice, regardless of how small it was, and a localized one at that. I won't dwell too much because friends of mine like Andrewism and BP from Overthrown Media have literally everything. This is basically Andrew's whole channel, right? Like that this gets back to what I was saying earlier about just coming to see a black face regurgitate your own idea. Like, really, if we were really, I don't know why Andrew doesn't have based on the way that y'all talk about y'all politics. I don't understand why Andrew doesn't have 1 million subs by this point. You know what I mean? But whatever. I will say is this is how we start. We start from the ground up, not the other way round. If you have to wait for a famous face to lead you to the promised land, then you've already kind of missed the boat. The revolution won't be televised. It won't be live streamed, and it most definitely won't be elected. It most certainly won't be edited into a nice, neat little, hour and 10 minute long video essay like this. It's planting a garden in that abandoned lot between the car shop and the daycare center, so folk in your neighborhood won't be dependent on Wiccan EBT for fresh produce. It's gathering toiletries from folk around the way to give out to the unhoused in your area. It's buying a bag of groceries for the old lady down the street who depends on Instacart and DoorDash since her kids moved out of state, if she even knows how to use those apps. It's starting a tool library for those who can't afford a power drill or a table saw or whatever, a community fridge or even a community shower. Like, have y'all seen those joints? Those are cool as all get out. You know, it's teaching somebody how to cook, teaching somebody how to sew, to patch up their own clothes. It's doing minor household repairs for folk who can't do it for themselves. It's literally as simple as asking your neighbor, what can I do for you? And what are you willing to offer in return? Literally all things that I've seen people do like 20 years ago when I was growing up, like literally, not even 20, right now, there are people literally right now all around the world doing exactly what I said, and most of them do so because they don't have another choice. The more we learn to depend on each other, the less we need to depend on the state. Much less do we need to depend on corpos, you know what I mean? We're never going to see a better world until we decide that that world is worth what it demands of us. That said, in the meantime, I do want to give a special shout out to this spot, to this. I can't even get it out. Deuces.